Welcome everyone to the August 11th, 2021 Community Formation Commission meeting. We'll call it to order at 5:33. And Sam, if you could do roll call.
Sure. Commissioner Damo Adamalikan? I don't see. Commissioner Alonso?
Here.
Commissioner Louisa Wood?
Present.
Commissioner Serafina Chavez?
Here.
Chair Escobedo is here.
Here.
Commissioner Kim Johnson?
Present.
Commissioner Rachel Johnson?
Here.
Commissioner Jordan Killebrew?
Here.
Commissioner Jacob Lesnar Buxton? Absent. Commissioner Mary O'Gorman?
Present.
Commissioner Lizzie Rodriguez?
Here.
Commissioner Richard Sander?
Present.
Vice Chair Zepeda?
Present.
And alternate Louis Reynaud is not. That completes roll call, Chair.
Thank you. And then we can now move to public comment for items that are not on the agenda for today.
Okay, I believe there's a question from the audience. Give me 1 second. Okay, this is the time for public comment. I will unmute you. We have one person. Simone, go ahead. You're unmuted.
Hi, Commissioners. I just wanted to share gratitude for you all continuing to take the time to meet. I really just wanted to uplift investment in seeking the input and support of community organizations and having speakers outside of folks who are active or retired police. I appreciate that Nicole was invited in to provide some input. But again, I think if we're limiting ourselves to people who are being paid and compensated by police officers, then we're also limiting what we're able to do and how we're able to serve our community. So I just want to uplift, again, the reason why you all are here, which was a community grassroots effort, which was disrupted by police and the police association, and to ask you to actually invite in the groups who made gatherings like this possible. So that doesn't just have to include Healing Justice, that I'm a part of, but it would be actually developing partnerships with other agencies. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I missed the name of the person.
Simone Ruskamp. There are no further questions or comments from the public, Chair.
Thank you, Sam. So next we'll move on to the administrative agenda, and it is consideration and action on the direct community formation meeting minutes for July 28th, 2021. Are there any changes anyone would like to make to those meeting minutes?
I have
And if
a
not,
question.
oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, I have a question. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Just on the item, of course now I lost it, but about the continued discussion, I'm pretty sure that when we voted on that motion, we also had a conceptual motion about models. It was conceptual, we were continuing it, but didn't we, talking about the models?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a part of today's discussion as well. And then hopefully, ultimately, we'll be voting on what that model is.
Okay, I thought we voted last time, like a conceptual motion, just, okay.
We continued the whole item, and then with the hopes of having commissioners who were absent at the last meeting, giving them the opportunity to comment.
That was my understanding, and with that, I would move to pass the minutes as read or as stated.
And do we have a second?
I second that.
So we have a first by Rich, a second by Rachel. And Sam, we could do a voice vote. There's no discussion.
There was a motion to accept the minutes as presented and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion passes.
Perfect. And I see we have here as well. No. We'll now move on to the first item of the meeting, and it's going to be continued discussion on civilian oversight model by Cami. So I'll turn it over to you, Cami.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. It's good to be with all of you again tonight. Just to recap the discussion, I know that a kind of a summary of what the group decided they might want to move forward with was sent out to all of you, but just to kind of recap, after discussing all of the different types of models, the group through consensus felt that the direction that they wanted to head into was a hybrid agency with a community or a review board component along with a monitor component as well, with the ability to do independent investigations when it was felt necessary. That there are lots of levels to that last piece I mentioned, and those are things that can be figured out that can look a lot of different ways. But that was the framework. Before I open it up so we can continue the conversation and maybe have some more voices, since we were missing some people last time. I also wanted to remind everybody, just to kind of frame that conversation, is that as we move forward with the model, with all of the administrative pieces, all of the authorities of civilian oversight, I just want to remind everyone it's really important to not only consider the needs of the community versus, well, needs, wants, and a lot of times those are all lumped together of the broader community, but then also it's important to always remember feasibility. How feasible, if we can put everything in there, how feasible are the recommendations that you move forward? That doesn't mean you have to give up anything in your recommendations. It just means that needs to be in the back of your mind as you're thinking of moving forward. I've seen some communities put together a lot of things in proposals where it was just kind of putting in without thinking about not only how all of those things work together, but how those things are going to be accepted by all stakeholders. So just keep all of that kind of in the back of your mind as we move forward. One other thing that I wanted to kind of put out there, and based on some of the feedback that I did receive, is I think it's to remember, I like to think of this piece, the oversight model that you choose is almost like you're building the stage that you're going to build everything else on top of. That doesn't mean that you can't move the stage around a little bit as you go forward. So this isn't, the decision you make is really, it's going to affect everything you do past this point, but it doesn't mean that this is such a final decision that you can't go back at some point and say, maybe we need to tweak this just a little bit. So I wanted to give you permission to know that that can happen, and that I don't want you to think that this discussion is the last time we can ever talk about monitors or review boards and how that all works together, because that'll be a continued piece as we move forward with the other pieces that we're going to attach to it. So with that said, I'd like to open it up. I did not receive a ton of comments or questions from everyone, and that either means that all of you are very excited about the hybrid agency, that you all have kind of started to move forward, or maybe you're still formulating those questions. So I want to give some time for those to come up and be put forward if anybody has any thoughts. So it's looking like it's the former of those two options. So no one has, just kind of giving some additional permission to kind of get some things out of you. I just want to make sure no one has any questions about what this looks like. Any thoughts? Okay. Well, I will not belabor the point then.
Well, can I ask? So Kemi, when you say what this looks like, because since we were conceptual, I guess, because that's what we're going to be kind of drilling down into, right? When we talk about authorities and stuff. So there's still work to do.
Yeah, so I think definitely there's more work to do. And I think that what will happen is now that we've kind of have this stage, that we can start building on top of it. And one of the things that I wanted to suggest is, because, you know, we have on this timeline in September and beginning of October, kind of really drilling in on the authorities and the administrative aspects of it. And I'd like to propose that so everybody has some additional information going into those conversations, because I think that the work that the working group did to present the models and the information was so key to everybody being able to have that conversation and move forward in the discussion last time. I would love to kind of come up with some ideas of things that I think we should discuss, and I'd like you to know more about. And so maybe that looks like me sending out some information, some resources for you to look at before the meeting. It could also look like, you know, taking 20 minutes at the beginning of the meeting to do some training on something. For instance, that could look like, you know, if you want to talk about reporting practices, what can that look like? Well, let's have a conversation about what are effective reporting practices and how other cities around the country are doing that piece. And we can do that with all of the different aspects so that you have as much information so you can be comfortable having the conversations and feel really good about the decisions you're making. So if you guys are all fine with kind of looking at that and how we move forward with that, then I can start putting together kind of what that might look like, the topics. And then as we go forward, you guys will mention things as we go that we'll add to the next agenda and the next training. So that is how I'm looking at it in my mind at this moment. And I'm seeing a lot of nods. So without objection, then I feel like we'll kind of move that direction.
And
so I don't know. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, just to clarify, so we're talking about the hybrid model with components of the auditor monitor. I just wanted to clarify before we move forward.
Yes, a hybrid model with both the auditor monitor components and a review board component.
Okay.
And then a little piece of the investigative model, in that what was discussed at the last meeting was having the ability to do independent investigations when it was felt necessary. Now, it's that when it was felt necessary that will have to be fleshed out a little bit. That's a much more in-depth conversation, but that's where everybody landed at the last meeting.
Okay, that sounds great. I reviewed the video. That one component is I'm interested for that conversation. Very invested in that. So.
I'm sorry that I wasn't there last time, everyone. I have a question, Cami, about the training and hiring, procedural recommendations that we've talked about being from the training and hiring policy group. Would that be something that would also be a part of this type of hybrid group? Okay.
Yes,
that's a
absolutely.
yes, then that answers my question. Okay.
Okay, good.
And Louisa, just to kind of take that a step further, that will go under those conversations of authorities.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you. That would be something that I personally don't know a whole lot about, and I look forward to getting a lot of training on that before we can move forward with those types of things.
Understood, yes. See Rachel's hand. Rachel?
Yeah, that actually Louise's comment made me think of something as well. So I listened to the recording as well. I also apologize. I wasn't able to be here. I was in a place as beautiful as where Rich is, but with no service out in the backcountry. So I just wanted to clarify because I know this came up in discussion. I think Lizzie brought it up, and then y'all had some time to discuss the other commissions that exist. So is that also something that would be under the authorities discussion, where we would talk about how recommendations we would make might affect other bodies that are already in existence?
Yes, it will have to be, it'll probably be part of both authority and administrative, because there are some things, ways that it will have to work, because legally it will have to work that way because of how the other bodies are structured, and what it looks like in the charter. And I think we all know that we're going to need John Joymus to walk us through that conversation quite a bit. But that we'll probably have that conversation in both of those categories.
Okay, and then just one more question, because I don't think this came up last time in discussion. Forgive me if I missed it, but I know this has come up in conversation with Lieutenant Hill in some of our working groups, but what about other bodies that are less formal than those charter ones? Like there used to be like an advisory group. Is there? Sorry, Jordan's smiling because I think he was on it, or on one of them.
That advisory group does not exist anymore.
So it's just okay. I just didn't know if there were other groups or something other than those two specific commissions that y'all discussed last time that we need to think about or talk about.
Okay, well, no, that's a good point. I think anything that exists, formal or otherwise, I think is smart to look at, see how it's functioning or how it's not functioning, and this kind of the strengths of when it did function, because if there might be some pieces to some things out there that would be helpful to fold into what your recommendations are for a new entity.
So something that no longer exists might be a good thing to look at in terms of why it wasn't effective. So
right, it would be very, very important.
Awesome, thank you.
And if I may add to that question, Chair Escobedo, Commissioner Johnson, one of the issues that really hasn't been brought up too, so there isn't really any advisory committees out there. The main commissions that exist that kind of delve into some areas of this, of course, the fire and police and civil service that you've heard about over. But don't forget, our police department's not our only departments that have peace officers. Like California Penal Code provides different categories of peace officers at different levels. And, you know, there are 2, possibly 3 of those at the lowest level because they don't carry weapons. But you have airport patrol, you have harbor patrol that do have the power of arrest and carry weapons. And then you also have park rangers, but they're not allowed to carry weapons or have the power of arrest. So, but they are categorized as a different level of peace officer. And so that's something maybe the commission wants to at least explore. But when we talk about that, the reason I bring it up is because there is a harbor commission and there's an airport commission. And so a lot of them advise or have certain powers regarding the operations of those departments. And within those departments are those 2 categories of peace officers. So I just wanted to bring that to the commission's attention.
John, could I ask a question real quick?
Sure, absolutely.
So with those departments, harbor and airport, do they handle their own complaints from the public and all that in-house, or does any of that expand to the police department or city hall? Because
that's a good question. With regards, so they have a procedure, process like you're required to in the penal code to receive complaints, Commissioner Gorman. We have done it on a workflow. In the past, maybe we've had our internal affairs do that. Lately, what we've been doing is our office has an investigator that's trained in ProBar, and so our office has done, our investigator, I should say, has done some investigations. Very few complaints, as you can imagine, so maybe 1 or 2, but we're the ones tasked with that if it comes to that. But it's a rare occurrence that we do get citizen complaints.
I'm really glad that you asked that question, Rachel, because this is something that I did bring forward to the Fire and Police Commission at one point, and I was told that it is not within our purview because there's an airport commission and a harbor commission. So as a fire and police entity, we had no authority to look at and really ask them to make a presentation. I did ask for the police scorecard, which I shared with the data group. And they both entities did provide information, but when I asked about training, I know that their training and I guess their processes are not, they're further behind. They're not within the same caliber as SVPD. So I think it's an important consideration if we want to. And how are we, if we do, how are we going to include these municipalities in this function, in the civilian oversight? Because it's comparing apples to oranges, oranges, and pears. And particularly what's different, there might not be many complaints, but their calls for service are much lower, and their calls are specific, like an airplane crash versus somebody burglarizing or trespassing. But their training, that's the key, is they don't have the same mandates that other police and sheriff's departments do. So if we're going to include them, that's one area I think we definitely want to look at.
Important.
Thank you for bringing that up. Anything else at this point?
I also just wanted to say I apologize for not making the last meeting. Had a scheduled vacation as well. And so grateful to be here and excited to dive back in.
You all were missed. Thanks for coming back. Okay, well, that really was the topic to cover underneath that line item. I think that given I'm taking notes as you've been starting to throw out some things. Yes.
Excuse me for interrupting. Before you move forward, we got a question from the public. It's asking if the past chiefs advisory group, what they did, and I don't know if you would know this question, probably John or somebody that may have served on the chiefs advisory committee, but what they did and did they cover oversight? Maybe Lieutenant Hill, and Jordan's nodding his head no.
Yeah, so I just full transparency, and I think most folks already know that I sat on the police chiefs advisory board, and it was only we were only brought together as needed, it seemed, in terms of there's a community situation, what should our response be? I think we had 4 or 5 meetings total. I was on it for 3 years. Sean, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was just more as a response than anything. We had no authority except for giving our thoughts to the current police chief.
Yeah, that's correct. I don't have too much to add on that. I mean, I think that the idea of that advisory board probably never reached its potential as it could have been, but it was for a group of community members to have direct access to the chief and vice versa, because oftentimes I think a lot of information by the time it gets to a police chief can be filtered in many ways. So it was try to get some direct access and kind of a voice from the community directly. And it involved a little bit of training, like some exposure to Force Options Simulator and stuff like that. But it was indeed, as Commissioner Killebrew said, kind of activated, the meetings were activated as needed for when policies were going to be discussed or something like that.
I just want to add, if I may, Commission, it wasn't a Brown Act commissioner or group, I should say. And why is that important, at least to suggest? I mean, the Brown Act obviously has all these rules, And the main impetus behind the Brown Act, as we know, is transparency for the public participation, public knowing what's going on. So, that's the most important part of this, or model, at least how my humble input is, at least whatever is advised, whatever model it is a Brown Act group, right? So things are done in the public. So this is, when we say advisory, that's exactly what it is, not, reaching out, getting input, diverse group of the community and hearing from that. And that's different from what you have right here as you're actually a Brown Act commission. So just wanted to add that point.
Cool. Thank you. That's all, Commission.
Thank you. So I was just going to say that I have been kind of writing down, I'll start to formulate some kind of a pathway for addressing the next conversations about authorities and administrative functions, and with some input, of course, so that we can start having those conversations and some little mini trainings along the way. So I'll try to get that information out to you all as soon as possible, and any resources that will help prepare you for those discussions.
Should we send you, if we have thoughts about that? Is that what you had said before?
Yes, always. If there are thoughts about the next conversation that you have, please just email me individually, and I will continue to create those lists and make sure that we're addressing everybody's questions and thoughts on the different topics. And then if I see a hole in there, I'll fill it, and we'll go from there. And I will send out a little, like I did last time, a little reminder about kind of a summary of where we are and what the next step is, to kind of prompt you all to start emailing me with your thoughts.
All right, thank you.
And so, Chair, I'll turn it back over to you, since I think that that's all I have on that agenda item.
Okay. I think, Mr. or John, do you suggest that we vote on the general concept of the model that we just landed on?
Maybe he's gone.
John, are you there?
Why don't we err on the side of caution while he works through anything? Why don't we take some form of motion, and then just to kind of, if the commission's leaning toward one way or another.
Sounds good.
I think Rachel Johnson had a question or comment.
Yeah, I just want to clarify before we go towards motion. So, because I think this was a bit of a confusion at the last one as well about like what this actually means to vote on this model right now. So what we would be talking about is the model that Cami laid out, this hybrid that took into account all the things that y'all discussed last time in this short discussion, as the model that we will adopt to develop over the coming months, right? So this would be the model that gets presented in some form to the community when we start doing outreach design and things like that. And will be many opportunities to develop and amend it in advance of our recommendation to the council. Is that correct? Okay, perfect.
Could I make a suggestion?
Of course.
When I've been part of these kind of discussions before, if we preface it with, this is the conceptual motion that we agree on as a place to start, and then it's clear, that it's conceptual, that we want more information, we want to dig deeper, and it's subject to change.
Thank you. Maybe that was the language I was looking for. I didn't know that language.
Or is it also just like a framework?
You're right.
If you will.
That's what I was going to ask.
I think it's a framework that we are building upon.
Okay, we have a conceptual framework for the model that we are going to build on, and that would be the hybrid review board, monitor with the ability for investigation in some form, which we need to flesh out. That would be my motion.
Do we
So
have a
I put
second?
the wording.
Was that a motion? I was going to say I move.
Yeah.
I
Lizzie
put the
put,
wording of that. Yeah, thank you. Go ahead, Gabe.
yeah, Lizzie put the wording, and I think it works really well. Is described it as a hybrid model with review board and monitoring component with ability to do independent investigations when needed. And I think that's broad enough for us to move forward. Mary, do you accept that in your motion?
Yes, that's, yeah, absolutely.
I'll second that.
If I could, really quick, in the description that Commissioner Rodriguez put in here, we're just missing one important word, which is agency, which I think we want to be deliberate about, like what type of hybrid model we are conceptually proposing. That will be iterative as we move along the process here, but I think that we should amend the motion to include the word hybrid agency model.
Can you remind us, Christian, what was the alternative to that? Agency meant one body, and there was an alternative that meant creation of multiple bodies, right?
That's right. Like, so a hybrid, like if you're looking at hybrids, there's two types of hybrids, right? There's the hybrid agency, which is one body that does multiple oversight functions, and a hybrid system is multiple agencies overseeing the same municipal police department. So I think we want to be deliberate that we're moving towards the agency versus a system, which is also an option.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's fine. I'm not settled on the agency concept yet until we talk more about the functions in relation to other city functions, but that's one of the things to flesh out. So.
Any other comments on that?
Commissioner Gorman on that. Where I am now, I'm leaning towards agency, but I would like to have more time and discussion and really looking at, having conversations about authority and administration before we go in that direction. Because I think if we do that, we are going to move in the direction that we're leaning towards in our motion. So I think having it a little more open gives us more options.
Yep.
So how does any other comments about that? Christian, how do you feel about that?
No, I think that if we're keeping it like conceptual and like iterative in the language of the motion, then I agree with Commissioner O'Gorman and Rodriguez that we don't have to like commit to something right now. But just so everyone's thinking about it, like those are the two different ones that we want to be evaluating. And it seems like in our last discussion, we were leaning that way. So I would call the question if everyone's ready to move on the motion.
Okay.
The motion that I made and Lisa seconded it, right? Is that
correct?
Yeah, I second it.
That gave the language for.
Okay, so I'll repeat that, Chair, just to get some clarification. So there's a motion by Commissioner O'Gorman, seconded by Commissioner Wood, for a conceptual hybrid model with review board and monitoring components with the ability to do independent investigations when needed. Let me see if there's anyone in the public that would like to speak on this. If there's anyone in the public that would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand in the chat feature. I do not see anybody, so all those in favor say aye.
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 Against? Motion passes.
Yay.
All right.
That's great.
That was a big milestone.
Yeah,
It's a
that
huge
feels kind of good.
milestone.
All right. So with that, we'll close that item and we'll move on to the next item, which is the discussion it's public outreach development. It's the Community Formation Commission will discuss and possibly approve a public outreach strategy that will be used during the process of developing a recommendation on civilian oversight for the city of Santa Barbara. And Cami, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, great, thank you. So I apologize, I did not talk to the working group beforehand, but I do feel that they have had a couple of very excellent discussions that I've been a part of about what this might look like. And I think if those members of the working group, if you feel comfortable kind of outlining some of the ideas that we came up or that you came up with, I think that that would be helpful at this point to lead us off. I'm sorry to spring that on you, but I do feel like, you know, the pieces about surveys, marketing packages, educational sessions, things like that, I think would be great to hear from you, kind of your thoughts around those. I'm happy to kind of throw them out one by one to have your thoughts on it, if that's helpful, since I feel like I'm throwing you all off a little bit by not having spoken to you before.
I'm pulling up our working group notes right now. So.
Okay, thanks, Rachel.
Yeah, maybe the report that you gave a couple months ago.
Just curious, how many people on that work group are here today?
Rachel, Jordan.
Is Vice Chair Zepeda here? No.
No.
Yes.
That's who. Oh, yeah. Then
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
we are all here.
Okay, great.
As I recall, we did have a discussion and then all of us gave some kind of input and then.
I've got the notes. I can do a quick review of the initial presentation we gave, and then I can look at the notes, or maybe the other working group people can fill in what kind of the subsequent discussions, just to remind people of what that initial. Does that work? Okay, so the initial meeting, the recommendations we made were to look into conducting a community climate survey on policing. So kept that pretty broad. We were looking at things like, multilingual survey, broad reach as possible, doing targeted outreach to make sure, groups that we really wanted to had access to the survey and understood, and really do, outreach around that. The idea with that was also then sort of working with NAQOL and potentially even a third-party survey developer to make sure we were asking the right questions and the ones that would get us the kind of data that we wanted. So even potentially then working with the data and analytics working group, or just the entire commission, kind of a discussion around the data we hope to get out of a survey. Presentations from community stakeholders was next. And I just kind of want to uplift what the public comment that Simone gave earlier, that this was all the way back in June when we first discussed having Healing Justice and other organizations present to us. So, I've got a little bit of anxiety, rightly so, that we've delayed that a bit. I know our reasons were to be thorough and thoughtful about how we did that. But yeah, this is a couple months since that kind of initial recommendation. And then presentations in general to build the commission's capacity to communicate better with the public. So understanding that in addition to us doing our own learning around these models, we actually might have other learning needs to make sure we can communicate best with the public about what we're doing. And then cultivating ambassadors, specifically in particular neighborhoods, stakeholder groups, using the collective expertise of this group that's brought together to yeah, make sure we do kind of the broadest possible outreach, including to, I think that was when the discussion came up of how best to engage with sort of the policing community as well, people who do or do not live in the community that they police, those kinds of attitudes. So we presented a preliminary list of a lot of the community stakeholders, everything from education sector to the nonprofit sector, business sector, communities that are historically policed at higher rates, and then other, which was kind of a catch-all of things like neighborhood councils and faith communities. So yeah, that was our first kind of summative presentation back in June. And then I don't know, Jordan, Anna, or Rich, do you want to add kind of where we went from there? Because I know we delved more into the survey, especially in the next meeting.
Rachel, thank you so much for that overview. It was superb. I'm in the notes right now. I do see
so
that
glad
we
did drive notes.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. I do see that we have discussion notes as well. And some of those that came off is just making sure that we model best practices. And so that our efforts as an oversight body should continue, or like regular community surveys and ongoing learning. So that's a continuation once it's put into practice. Commissioner O'Gorman also talked about just accessible days and meetings, and I also reflected that they should be in different locations at different times throughout the city, virtual and in person. And we listed out a couple locations as well. There was also a comment from other Commissioner Johnson, Kim Johnson, just having talking points. So how do we best train ourselves? So how do we best put ourselves, and I think that's what Rachel was, other Commissioner Johnson, Rachel, was talking about, how do we build ourselves up and all get on the same page to then go out in the public and feel comfortable and confident about presenting this conceptual model or whatever we come up with. And I know that in our timeline that we did 2 meetings ago, there are 3 iterations of how we do that and how we outreach and when we take it to the public. So we're going to have to do a little bit of extra work to make sure that we have the talking points, the right design collateral. I have design background, so don't worry about that, and everything else, so that people feel comfortable and we are able to execute and have any frequently asked questions back up should those come to us as we are looking for outreach and feedback. And then, of course, as always, we just want to be intentional. I want to echo what Rachel is saying, being intentional not only when we do outreach, but with the language that we use. And that goes to what was talked about in last meeting's recording about this writing group, that the development of that writing group is going to be very crucial, and how that is written out and how that is communicated is very, very important. And so, yeah, so there's a lot of good stuff here. There's not necessarily an exact community outreach plan, but we have a lot of great information and sectors listed, organizations listed, that we want to continue to, engage and bring people more so into the fold. I want to also give a shout out to Commissioner Ana Cepeda for having Sam send out that nice little graphic to let people know. I put it on my Instagram, but I think we should start letting people know that these are happening so that we can get some more community feedback as time continues to go on and as we get deeper and deeper in conversation. That will just be an added bonus to this community outreach plan that we are currently developing. Rich, did you have anything else, or does anybody have any questions? And thank you, Rachel, for always just being so quick with notes. It's amazing.
That was good.
She was a good note taker. It was that.
I guess one thought I have, the way it's framed on the agenda, let me see, discussion, or no, where is public outreach development? So Jordan, I think one of the most crucial things, as you said, is that we all have kind of the same, I guess, baseline of what it is we mean by outreach in the context of the Community Formation Commission. And that's a challenge because we all come from different places, and so being able to pinpoint what it is that we both want to educate ourselves about, educate the community, and hear from the community about. So I'm wondering if, since we have a conceptual model, if that's where we start, like Cammie's gonna write some things out, said, and it's somehow, I guess at the next meeting or between now and the next meeting, kind of trying to synthesize that into not necessarily a script, but talking points that we would
Absolutely.
all.
So I guess I'm putting myself on the writing group, or putting myself up for the writing group. So I do communications for a living, and I'm happy to put together talking points and everything from that. I think from our vantage point of when we're reaching out to the community, we're looking for feedback. We're looking for what they're thinking, and so how do we put what we're conceptually putting together in layman's terms, not necessarily, that's the wrong word, how do I say this, in the baseline that you're saying, the baseline for people to understand and absorb it, and sit with it. And so I think as we are the purveyors of educating the community and purveyors of this knowledge, we have to make sure it's at that baseline level, and we also have to be sure to be, how do I want to say, unbiased from our own personal opinions, because as a group we are deciding on this, and so that when we go to the community we have to make sure that we are all in unison. So yes, it's a lot of work, but it's something I do in my day-to-day job, just making sure that our own employees feel comfortable talking about the Santa Barbara Foundation where I work. So I'm happy to jump on that team.
Yeah, and just to add to that, absolutely. I mean, I think I'm looking at the notes from our July meeting, the later one that we had, and that was one of the things, that why it's so important, the vote that we just did earlier in this meeting, was that what we ultimately decided was that since surveys and public meetings take so much time, and if you just ask people, hey, what do you think, you're going to get a ridiculously huge amount of feedback that's unwieldy. So that's why now that we have, or nothing at all, exactly, because I mean, folks don't know what they don't know. I didn't know what a hybrid model with investigatory powers was. So yeah, so now that we have that, the idea with the survey, especially with now we can present a brief summary, explaining that it's conceptual, but so the public actually now has something to respond to rather than just, hey, how do you feel about community oversight and policing? So and yeah, and then kind of to echo what Mary was saying, one of the other things we discussed was remembering that we were all vetted and appointed precisely because we have like expertise, we have relationships with certain communities, we already have, right? That's why we're here. So really, yeah, kind of like owning that, and then once we have these talking points, it really becomes out, like we joked, everybody's on the outreach committee basically from now.
Ambassadors, I like that.
And I wanted to kind of chime in on the education piece. I really love that you're thinking about that already, because that is so important, because you don't want to send something out and just get people's opinions. You want to get their educated opinions. And I really, one of the things that was discussed in that July meeting was making sure that there's a recorded meeting where there's an educational session, so that people can go to the website and view a recording of that information, even if they're not able to participate in a live, an in-person or a virtual meeting. I think also some things to consider are, maybe there are some people that you will never reach with a survey, but you might be able to have a focus group with them to get some very specific feedback. And that's everyone from members of the business community, members of the immigrant community, people who you think might not feel comfortable or take the time to fill out a survey, because unfortunately with surveys, a lot of times people feel like, well, I'm just one person out of many that are going to fill this out and it's not going to matter. But if we give them a choice to have their voice heard, that might help get some opinions that you might not otherwise get. So I do think that there are some things that have to happen quickly and simultaneously. Jordan, I love that you somehow just jumped in and nominated yourself for the writing group. I love that when that happens. It's much better than when you ask for volunteers and there's silence.
Well, I would like to say that I work in the education field and I do a lot of development of education curriculum, and I would be happy to join that team and help develop and make sure that we're all teaching and or talking to at points to fidelity. That would be more of my expertise could come in and help Jordan. So
Fantastic.
Yes,
And
please.
I of course will provide the info, as much of it as I can, to then make it for you guys to take and make it work for your community.
So I'm not necessarily volunteering, but I just wanted to jump back to something Cami just said a little while ago and try to model this being intentional with our language. I absolutely feel like it's our responsibility to educate the community as best as we can. But when saying, we want their educated feedback, their educated response, like I also feel like it's important to say, this is not a cerebral issue for a lot of people. This is an emotional, very experiential issue for a lot of people. So just, yeah, we want to educate, but we also don't want to say to people, like, if you don't know the different oversight models, we still want to know your experience with police. We still want to, right? So, I mean, I want to be intentional about that.
Thank you for saying that, Rachel.
No.
So I also wanted to add, before we send out like the surveys and do all this, if we can start working on translating the agendas on the website, because none of the agendas are in Spanish. So at least having that available. And then also, I always look to see about how the PDF, I know I brought it up when they were talking about how to submit a complaint against a police officer. The PDF is still not working, and that was like, what, 3 meetings ago? So if we can elevate that as well. So if we're asking individuals, do you know how to submit a police complaint? And then we tell them, hey, you actually go on here, and then they go on there and it's not working, then it's, it's further, it's further creating that harm. It's not even available for them. So if we can work on that, or whoever needs to do that, please and thank you.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so that's my suggestion. And then maybe if.
Hello?
Hope we lost you.
Sound went out. Can't hear anything.
So
yeah,
that's unfortunate. I really wanted to hear what she had to say.
Yeah.
As she was talking, I was also, I appreciate all this conversation, especially on community outreach. It's very important. But I think one organization that really can help is also TVSB. I've been on there a couple times and surprised at how many people actually really do watch that. And that could be an outlet where we may do a video or two and get that and send it over to them and get that on there in their rotation for when we have these separate iterations for community feedback. So I think that's something that we should also add to the list.
What was the name of that group, Jordan?
TVSB. It's the local broadcast.
Got it.
Yeah.
There's also City TV, which is the city organization. So TVSB is awesome, and they have their own channels, but then City TV also has that, which is the function that usually records the meetings. So those are 2 great options.
Would it be possible, like recently I saw on City TV, I have to admit I have it on a lot for some reason, but I just saw a video that Chief Malikian is doing for just sort of small, short educational clips. But is that something that maybe, Sam, you can look into, that, or Gabe, the city could do once we have our script, that whoever among us, someone do it in Spanish, someone short informational.
Yeah, absolutely.
On Facebook as well.
Absolutely. Commissioner O'Gorman, through the chair, whatever resources that the city has available are available to the commission. So if there's something that another department is doing, let me know, and I'll see if that's something that this commission can pursue as well.
Can I also just throw a suggestion of Spanish language radio. I know radio
Yes.
is often a much better way to reach communities, like we do even at City College. Our promise ads that go on the Spanish radio we get better feedback and better response from that. So I think that's a good one. I can't volunteer for that. I know we have.
How,
I know we have Spanish people.
how do our chairs feel about doing radio?
What's up?
I don't have a good radio voice. I think we can nominate someone else.
Well, the radio stations also, like, we don't do our own promise spots. They have a wonderful one who reads the language for us. So
Resonate.
but yeah, let's not forget about radio. It's coming back.
But yeah, Commission, we would happy to do City TV. Our office, we did both in English and Spanish. We talked about the tenant protection ordinance going out there. So we've done that before, used that before, and be happy, whether it be commission or commissioners on do that, we can make that arrangement and we can spread the message. We have some in our office also bilingual that can do that too. So we'd be happy to at least whatever we can contribute from our resources to make it happen.
Yeah, and keep in mind that the Spanish radios, because I recently posted an ad there, it is costly. So it was unexpectedly more expensive than I anticipated. But there are also other public Spanish radios that are used just as frequently. So keep that in mind when we're thinking about, how we're going to do outreach, where would be the most effective use of funds that we might have available. And even if we don't run an ad per se, having someone appear to speak about it and do Q&As, I found that was most effective during a couple years ago during the fire and debris flow when we didn't have Spanish information available. That was the main way that folks got information, was having, believe it was Officer Gutierrez and there was one more, Liliana, who would go to the fire station and give periodic updates. And that was, that was so key. So having interviews might be more effective than running an ad, but I think, just kind of keep in mind budget.
Kind of along similar lines.
If the city,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, along similar lines, in media, social media, it's another great tool. And again, most of the time it's free. And I was just thinking that, we could reach out to either like community stakeholders and ask them to either post a link to our survey, or like we said, I think Commissioner Rodriguez had just said like interviews, like one of us, if it's possible, we could go on there and interview with whoever's, either like Instagram or Facebook account, and either do it live or pre-recorded. But that's another great, pretty much free tool. There are also ads that you can run for free or for very little money, both on like Instagram, Facebook, and we can do that in multiple languages. So that's just another really great resource that I think we should consider as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Serafina. We have that in our document, and we have a couple of organizations that we want to partner with and help spread the word. So thank you for that, for uplifting that.
Yeah, of course. Glad to hear that.
Yeah, and I just want to say as well, I'm all for equity budgeting. So even if Spanish ads or different language ads are more expensive, I think maybe that's precisely where our money should go, because there's so much other outreach, I think, that works for communities that are more connected in different ways, like technologically and otherwise. And I think also, I would love, this is not my area of expertise, but I know other commissioners it is, thinking just about access with other communities with disabilities, different student groups, stuff like that. Like, there's a lot of different access conversations we should have.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And do we know if there are any community gatherings or festivals, anything coming up? I know with COVID it's a little tenuous, but if any of those are already on the calendar, it might be worth it to have a table or something like that.
There's Center Mobile Housing Day in October, but I don't know the day.
Okay. He said Jacob, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said the Santa Barbara Housing Day is in October. He doesn't know the date.
Yeah, but our organization is doing that, and I know they're planning on doing it in Delaware Plaza.
I'm sorry, Jacob, can you say that one more time? I think you said our organization is.
You participating, and I know they were doing it in Delaware Plaza.
Oh, yeah,
Daily
so
Care
your
Plaza.
organization, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what? I missed that.
They're giving it in Ortega Plaza. Was that what it was?
Yeah, you
It's
got one in front of City Hall.
Daily
Yeah.
Care Plaza in front of City Hall.
Yes.
In front of, yeah, it's,
Yeah,
I just looked it up. It's Saturday, October 9th, 10 to 2. And then there's going to be, I think, a North County one as well, but obviously that one may not apply to us. But yeah,
This
that's enough time.
This might be in your notes. Sorry, Jacob, go ahead.
We could also table outside vaccination clinics.
At vaccination clinics.
Because I know they're doing many different kinds throughout the weeks.
Love that. I think that's an excellent idea. Thank you, Jacob. We'll take a look at the calendar. We'll look at the timeline and then align with the calendars, especially in October. And I think another time was in November, and then come back to February to see when exactly are really key dates to do very public outreach. I really love that idea.
Yeah, it could be a great
Lizzie?
idea. Tabling, especially if it's outdoor events, then COVID's less likely to get in the way.
And it's probably already on your list of ideas, but reaching out to local foundations who give money to organizations, and then they can send the alert out. It might also be helpful to, when they send those invitations to participate, maybe also asking if there's any barriers that prevent them from either filling out an online survey or attending an informal information event. That way we can be educated and informed on what's preventing them.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lizzie. There's actually an email that Hutton Parker Foundation, along with Nonprofits Resource Network, SB, and a couple other foundations send out every Wednesday. And there's a good news on Friday, but they send out a lot of good information to our nonprofit sector, who is on the front lines working with our, most vulnerable or more vulnerable communities. And so I think that would be an excellent avenue to put a survey in and lots of information. So thank you. Really appreciate that.
And then also looking at Chamber of Commerce, Downtown Organization, the Rental Association, those are all folks that are probably not on top of our minds, and maybe overlooked often when it comes to thinking about community input.
And the neighborhood councils, I think of.
Yeah, those are all on the list that was in our summary, but I think that this is a good point. Like, we should probably share that list somewhere with the whole commission so people can actually look at it and add. I'm sure we've forgotten other ones, so I can just, should I just send that to Sam and Gabe and Anna?
Maybe Cammy or.
Well, and can I insert a possible suggestion here too? I think that what all of you are talking about is a lot more than what one working group can handle at this point. And so my suggestion would be is that the communications or the community engagement working group has done so much of the outlining of this. That list is great of the different organizations to reach out to, and it's definitely a good starting point, much more actually than a starting point. But I think that just listening to you speak now, it looks like there is enough work for a writing committee, which people have already volunteered for. The survey needs to be developed fairly and simultaneously. I also think along with the writing group, I think that also is perhaps also the internal, external education group, because that all has to work together. And then I also think that perhaps there's a working group that's looking on the specific outreach events, whether it is going to specific events, it's the recording of events, it's maybe a town hall meeting that's done virtually or in person. And so, and there may be some other working groups, but those are the three that immediately came to mind as you were talking. Because I think that if you kind of spread that work out, then we can come back together the next time with some more concrete things to look at. I don't know. How do you guys feel about that?
I mean, that's kind of what I was assuming. At this point, it's kind of going to be all of us in terms of taking responsibility for, like, I think one of the things that was on there, or I mentioned, is some of the criminal justice groups, like Community Corrections Partnership. That's something that I've talked to Ethan Bertrand about when they have meetings. You're finding out when these groups are having meetings, and then kind of, like I would volunteer to go there, once we had a script or something to do. Same with neighborhood council meetings, or so yeah, how we divide that up, or when, because I guess the first thing is that we're going to get our script, or our
yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
Well, I think while the script is being developed,
Mhm.
some of you can find out because I mean, October is going to be here before we know it. And so finding when those neighborhood council meetings are, when, all of those different meetings, and then coming to the full group and saying, who can do this one.
I'm happy to be on that subcommittee or whatever.
I kind of see it as somebody develops a Google calendar of this is this date, this is this date, this is this date. And as a group, we need to prioritize which ones we want to get to and who can do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm not the best at Google Calendar, but I can find out the dates. Maybe if somebody wants to. I just suffered through a Google document last night. It's not my strength, but
I can help with that too, Mary.
Okay.
Is the definition of these new working groups something that we want is going to happen like tonight? Is this part of?
I think we're doing that.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just had a quick suggestion, since Jordan already volunteered to be on the writing one and stuff like that. I don't want to speak for Rich and Anna, but what I might suggest is that the outreach group, the four of us, actually divide ourselves up. So each of the four of us be on one of those four, because then we've got the background of kind of what we've talked about in our heads. Right. I'm happy to do, if Jordan's going to take the writing one, I don't know if anyone else has, I'm happy to be on the survey group, because I'm actually very excited about developing a survey.
I'm excited that you're going to be on the survey group.
And then I don't know if Rich or Anna, if you're up for that, like, does one of you want to do that, like the community events group, and another one, the internal, external education? And then everyone else can divide up wherever they want.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do community events. I feel like that's kind of my wheelhouse. I love community, so sure, that sounds good.
All right, so that's Rich, me, and who else?
I will be happy to do community events.
All right.
And Jacob.
Excellent.
All right.
I realize that sort of leaves Anna with the sort of community internal and external education. I don't know, is Anna back? I know she was having audio stuff.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great. Wherever I'm needed, so no problem.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rachel, for that idea, and thank you, everyone, for starting to sign up. I'm excited for this next iteration of our groups. I do want to uplift. I think Mary O'Gorman just said that yes, we will be focusing on our specific areas, but this is all of us. Like, we'll be reporting back, and it's all of us. I just want to make sure that that is an agreement. because it's not just this one group going forward. We need all of you.
Yes.
So good. All right, I just want to clarify. Thank you.
Yes, as Mary
Thank
also
you
said
for
earlier,
underlining that.
we are all ambassadors, every single one of us, to our
Yeah.
groups.
And to that end, I would say for the community events group, if individuals, some of you want to send information, to me, and then Rich and me and Jacob can put it together, so that we have sort of collective information gathering, for lack of another phrase.
And just so I'm clear, are we dissolving the prior subcommittees?
I think
I'm not,
actually, maybe.
not all of them? I'm not sure.
I think
Well, some
my understanding, we just broke apart the outreach one. So the four
I feel like
now broken out into 4 others. I don't know if we need to dissolve the other ones, because the other ones really aren't doing much right now.
I think when we get to the point that Cammie talked about, when we're drilling down on the authorities and stuff, like we did some stuff in our policy training group, that I think would be good to share. So just a matter of timing, I guess.
If I can, one thing that I think might be helpful, and it was a oversight on my part when we first started and came up with the working groups, is creating clear definitions for the working groups so that each of them knows exactly what they're working towards. I think would be really helpful. So for example, the writing group, I imagine, is working on the talking points that we would be able to use for educating the general public and to make sure we're all on the same page. So that one's pretty clear. But
I was also going to say development. I was also say for that, since Jordan and I are already in that group, developing the material that we'll be handing out, like the PowerPoints, if we have any PowerPoints or anything that needs to be accessible for anyone in our community. So, but I was also going to ask, I heard people talk about creating little videos and things like that. I mean, for,
I'm in for that too.
Instagram, is that I can help with that too. I just don't know if that would be a part of our group or per se, or where that would go. That's a lot of work. So
yeah, I think my thought was internal, external education, but
I was wondering that too. Yeah,
that your expertise is also, I mean, there's definite crossover and need in both places, and we need to make sure that both match.
Right.
What we're saying in one has to be said in the other. So I think two will work very closely together.
Yeah. Okay.
Just to Gabe's point about clarification of roles, I also want to just say the writing group at this point is like talking points messaging, not writing the report, like the recommendation, because I think we'll have another writing group that's going to be less fun than the writing you're about to do.
I think we can call that, maybe it's marketing and education.
Yeah, like call it the marketing group.
Information, whatever.
Communications.
Communications, that's, yeah.
Doesn't anyone want to be on the survey group with me?
I will, Rachel.
I'll be on that with you as well, Rachel.
Kim looked excited. That was good.
I meant to say it, but the conversation moved on. But yes.
Awesome.
I'll be on that with you as well, Rachel.
Excellent. All right. And Cammie, as usual, I think we assume you're on all of them.
Yes.
Cammie can go to all of them.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to meeting with all of you.
And Mayor Maria, I see you there.
Thank you. May I add support to John Doimus's statement that City TV would be available. TVSB is the public access TV station, but they do provide services to people who want to make videos. And there might be some cost, but it wouldn't be something that we couldn't approve. We also have Spanish translators and interpreters at the city, and they would help unless someone among the group wanted to do that. People take pride in doing those kinds of services. And then I did want to mention the Neighborhood Advisory Council. And I know you were talking about different groups. So the city has a commission, and it draws residents from the East Side, Downtown, West Side, and Laguna neighborhoods, which are the census tract acknowledged working class neighborhoods, I guess is the way I would say it. It has to do with household economy, household earnings. So they, I think, would love to spread the word if you're talking about getting input on whatever you're presenting, your model. And they meet virtually, but they're connected to each of those neighborhoods. So that would be a source too of
we'll get them in the calendar.
Engagement. And I know Bread and Roses is sort of on the calendar as a in-person event for October, right? But we're all wondering about things that are going to be in person from now on. So thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
Can I ask you, who at the city helps coordinate the neighborhood councils, or is there one person appointed who?
I believe it's Matt Four in the city administrator's office.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Cool. Can I ask the question of I don't know how much time? I mean, I know that we have the timeline, but when is it that we want to be starting sharing materials? Is this soon? Right.
Well, according to the timeline, we're talking about October for
everything.
Yeah, because we want to make sure that we can capture the data. I think what the communication or community engagement group had originally talked about was capturing the data before the end of November, particularly so that we didn't miss students.
But we want to be able to share it with the whole team, since we just discussed that this was a team effort, right? So given that, we want this material by September or something like that.
I would say
I'm looking at
mid-September.
Jordan. Okay.
Yeah,
mid-September.
Oh, go ahead, Jordan. I'm sorry.
I think the first.
I think we have everything buttoned up by mid-September, and then start educating ourselves.
Right.
So that way people are having time, our group has time to sit with it, absorb it, ask questions, make sure that it's resonating, do some feedback, and then come back and then disseminate it to the community at large.
I think that piece that Jordan just said is so vital. We almost have to do like sort of role playing ourselves. What questions could be asked? What do we need to be ready for? Where do we need to fill in the gaps?
And I would also say, like, we're in receiving feedback. It's okay. I would say in that moment, if we don't have the answers, then that's okay. Those are questions that we take back to our larger group, that we say, oh, this is a question that continues to pop up. How to respond? So I just want to, I know that sometimes we want to know, and we want to be able to answer all questions, but perhaps there may be some questions we aren't able to answer in this first go around to the community. So I just wanted to share that.
Awesome. Exciting.
Lizzie's typing has such a lyrical beat behind our words.
Sorry.
Yeah. I was trying to figure out who it was, but
the drums or
I
something.
thought I muted myself.
I started lighting up, everyone.
My thinking is here, so
I know, I'm the
sometimes
same way. That's why I have such good notes.
Thank you both for taking notes. Rich, did you have a question? Sorry, I'm taking you.
Yeah, sorry, I cut out for a couple minutes there, so I missed some stuff. But just logistically, one thing that we may want to do is in these working groups, maybe a point person for each working group, because I know when we broke up into working groups last time, there was a lot of like who's going to lead on when we meet or organize it. And that may be a little more helpful to just get that done in this meeting so that we don't have another meeting figuring out who's going to set a meeting or what have you. It's a basic logistic thing. I'm sorry about that.
Because you're not in the group with me now, right? You're worried. Who's going to take notes?
Rich and I are.
Yeah, Rachel was on it for us. So now
you miss me already. I get it.
It's a good point, Rich. Are people from those groups willing to just step up now into that role?
Yeah, I'm happy to do it.
Sure.
Should we finish assigning groups? I don't really think we haven't really. I don't think everybody's on a group yet.
No.
Can somebody write it in the chat so we can see what they are?
Maybe we need to type something out.
Yeah.
I can drop what I have in the chat.
Thank you, Rachel.
Automatically go to everybody.
Thank you, Rachel.
And then quick point of clarification. We're at the public outreach development point in our agenda. Did we skip anything?
No.
Okay. All right.
And Chair, as they kind of draft that up in the chat feature, there's a question from the audience on this item from public comment. I just want to take that if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to add something before public comment, Sam. Just for Brown Act purposes, making sure it's available to the public all, so the public can see if we're going to go to the chat feature. Maybe once it's in the chat feature, just for transparency, we read that into the record. That's all I suggest. So, sorry for the interruption.
Do you want me to read that now or take public comment first?
We'll do public comment first. And then go back.
Okay.
Is that okay, Chair? Okay. Then I will open it up to the public. Okay, if you have a question or comment on this item, I'm going to unmute you. Simone, I believe you're unmuted.
Yes, I just was really hoping for some clarification around this survey. And I'm saying this for a few reasons. I think sometimes we ask people the same question multiple times, expecting different answers. And so I'm just wanting to remind the Information Commission that there have already been town halls for the city and county around police, around oversight. And so community has already said what they've wanted. And so I think what I'm needing to have some understanding on is what is the survey trying to get to and how will those responses and feedback be shared? And the reason I'm specifically naming that is because we know right now with the search for a chief, people have been encouraged to fill out anonymous forms online, but none of those responses are transparent. So we only hear about the responses that the police department wants to tell us. And I would be highly concerned if whatever survey used for this group is administered in the same way, because there's a lack of transparency, a lack of clarity. It just adds to a lack of trust. And so I just want to ask again, why? What is the purpose of the survey? What are you asking? And are we asking people to tell us something that they have already told us? And if so, how does that add to drawing out a process of just getting to oversight? Because just as a reminder of this process, once you all put together your recommendation, it's just a recommendation, right? It then goes to city council to decide what they want to do and what they want to listen to. And so I get a little bit worried when we start adding, and I don't want to say to not take on work, because that's not what I'm saying, but I don't want us to add on so much that we are moving our goal out further and further and further, which means less time for oversight. I also just want to clarify to Anna's comment that we knew the form was not working to file complaints against the police department for several months. So myself and Crystal Farmer actually spoke with the chief about this before she left her position. So that is how long this has been going on, which again concerns me that now we're talking about doing a lengthy survey, which requires analysis, breaking it down and sharing it back to the public when the public has already told you what they want. So I'm just really needing clarification. Why a survey? How will the information be shared? And do you actually need to be told this again, right? So I would appreciate some clarity around that. I think the education to people sounds great, so people understand where you all are in the process, but I need some understanding of why, because I think I want to push back on requiring people to tell us the same thing multiple times, especially when it's not clear how that information is going to be used.
Absolutely.
Thank
you, Simone. I guess from my perspective, and maybe we need to talk a little bit more about the survey. The survey was in addition to the community outreach to get feedback about the specific models that we are putting out into the community. And so that is, from my perspective, what I saw the survey being. It's just another avenue for people to give feedback and for us to mold it to what the community needs and wants. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I'll just add to that, because I think at this point it is a little speculative, right? We haven't decided what the survey is going to look like. So I really appreciate that, Simone, those questions, because I think you're absolutely right. I don't actually know all of the past surveys or feedback, right? So that is one thing for us to ask city staff, and also maybe, because it might be community groups who have done other surveys, is for us to all understand what has been done in the past, like what surveys have already been completed. I do think that hopefully at the next meeting, we'll have more of an answer to that question of why the survey and what will be in the survey. I do think what I feel like we can say now is that it really is what we voted on earlier tonight of like what actually is this model that we are proposing, that is going to be at the core of the survey to actually get feedback from people on that model. So I hope, my gut is that kind of specificity of feedback hasn't been acquired before because we didn't have that model. And you're right. Like getting the same stories from the community, we don't necessarily need to do that. I do feel like in the community outreach and the in-person events, we're going to get a lot of that in that sense. So I think those are great questions for us to think about as we go into designing the survey, as are the questions of dissemination, right? And my hope is that we've tried to model that practice as a commission of like being as transparent as possible. We're building in, hopefully, safeguards of transparency into the recommendations we want to make. And so that's a great question, right? Like, are we going to make the survey responses just public, right? Like, if they're all going to be anonymous, if we design the survey in the way that I hope we do, that should be an easy thing, right? To be able to make just the raw data widely available, right? Publicly available. And Cami, maybe for our next discussions, like that's something I would also ask you, because I know we've talked about other communities who have done these surveys. And initially when we talked about it, we did talk about it as a climate survey, which is sort of how do you feel about police oversight? Mm-hmm. And I think in the weeks since those initial meetings, now we're thinking of it more, how do you feel about this kind of model? Does it have the kind of authority the community is looking for? Does it have the kind of purview that the community is looking for? So I hope it's more specific.
So Rachel, that was going to be my question statement, was that I think we're talking about two different surveys. I don't know if the feedback survey is a survey or if it's just feedback, because my understanding with the survey group was that it was a climate survey. And that is there are various models of how to do climate surveys. What kind of questions are you going to ask? What are we looking for? Perhaps the climate survey would be best served for the actual oversight commission, because that might be more of their purview. And what we're looking at is feedback. So maybe we can change the name and it not be a survey, it's feedback. However, listening to public comment, Simone, I think it is important that when we are asking for information from the public, when we're asking for their experiences and stories, a climate survey essentially, that we want to invite groups who have already done this to provide their summary, to provide a narrative on what they've learned, so that we're not discounting work that was done before. I also think it's important that maybe certain groups who have done this may not have targeted the entire community. They may have targeted a specific sect of the community. And so I think it's important that we do our due diligence and make sure that we make it available to as many people as possible and make it as easy as possible to participate. And then invite other organizations and individual groups to submit something outside of that survey based on their data that they've collected. But I think it's important that we clarify now, are we doing a climate survey or are we doing a feedback form?
Yeah, I mean, my from this conversation, I believe it's the latter, right? Like we voted on a model specifically so we could offer that up to the public to respond to, and hopefully provide a lot of other educational talking points and transparent dissemination of what we've already done as a commission, so that it's very kind of specific feedback, and getting that from as wide a range as possible. I think we should probably put aside the language of climate survey, and I think that's an interesting idea, right? Like having something like that be part of the recommendation for the actual oversight body, because I do think that that's something that an ongoing body is going to have to regularly revisit. I
agree with you.
Yeah, I would definitely love to learn what surveys have been done. That's my own ignorance of like what Simone was referencing in terms of lots of other places where there's already been feedback about that. So
and that's where I want clarification, and I'm hoping maybe Attorney Doimus can help us with that, because I think that we are all eager to make things better, to make things equitable and right and just. And because of our excitement and passion and commitment to that, I wonder if sometimes we might be overstepping our purview. And so is the climate survey within our purview? Is asking people to tell us about their experience with law enforcement within our purview? Or is our purview to, develop recommendations and present it, and then maybe one of those recommendations is to do a climate survey, or, So if we can have clarification on that, because I think that may also affect how we show up at some of the public events.
Right.
So thank you, Commissioner Rodriguez. In terms of just like a clarification, we're talking about purview. You're talking about, can you repeat the question in terms of recommendations again, just so I have clarity on it?
So I am, and I asked this because this came up in our Fire and Police Commission when we wanted to appear in public, and how we are appearing. Are we appearing as an individual or as a commissioner? What are we asking or saying? So in our role as CFC commissioners, is it within our purview to ask people to tell us about their experience with law enforcement, to encourage them to file a complaint, to even do a climate survey?
Sure.
Is that within this CFC purview?
No, so thank you, Commissioner Rodriguez and Commission. So obviously in your own role, independent capacities, I wouldn't, that's their own personal choices. But when in representing this commission, the sole purview of this commission isn't to do what you said in terms of, encourage people to make complaints or issues. The purview of this commission is to do what you guys have been doing very successfully so far, is to study and look at what the community needs are and come up with a recommendation to present to council in a couple of months in terms of the best model to use, and to be as detailed as possible to give as much guidance to the council of why you made this recommendation, hear the details, etc. That's the sole purview of this commission. The things you mentioned are outside of that, so it's not within the purview. It's not nothing we can take an action on. It's nothing we can make a recommendation on, because those issues don't have anything to do with the model, right? The focus in is what model do we believe the city of Santa Barbara needs. Here's why. Here's how it works, and that's it. So that's where the focus of the commission should be on, based on what council has tasked you to do, which this commission has done very successful. I do want to raise a point too, though, since it came up. I think it's important not to ignore this at all, and especially as assistant city attorney, I get very concerned making sure complaint forms are working. Otherwise, we want to be compliant with the penal code. I did look at the online Santa Barbara Police Department during our meeting. It seems to work both in English and Spanish. I don't know, Lieutenant Hill wants to add anything on to at least address that issue for the commission. I know it's just an important issue to raise for the public on this. So Lieutenant Hill, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's also a significant concern to me. I did test it recently, and it was working. So it's perhaps, I don't understand exactly what the problem is. Potentially it's an accessibility issue based on our city infrastructure. So I can reach out to our city IT department and get some guidance and let them run an analysis on it. Because just for me as a user, I've tested it and it seems to be working. So I do want to make sure that I'm responsive to that concern, because it is a significant concern.
Okay, and for further, I am sorry if it seems like I am like beating this, but I just want to make sure that we do this, in accordance. So I saw the note from Mayor Murillo that she said, please, by all means, ask for information. And so I just wanted, so when we're in public space, when we're representing the commission, our representation is as a body to collect information, form a recommendation, present that to the city council. We can easily say, I am taking off my commissioner hat and I would love to hear your experience. So it's not that we can't do that. We just have to be mindful of if we're doing that as an individual, that may then inform us as commissioners, or are we doing that as commissioners? And so I just ask us to just be mindful of our role and responsibilities while also being persons who are interested.
Sure, Chair Escobedo, Commissioner Rodriguez. The issue here, we're under the agenda item about public outreach, and so this commission is very unique, has many members, and it has outreach, and it's been selected for its diversity, its connections to the city, the tie. It's a wonderful commission, and so please, by all means, the commission should go on and do outreach to here, in terms of, and present in terms of the outreach they've done, and put on new agenda items of groups we need to talk to, or outreach, or new suggestions. That's part of that. These other issues, though, aren't under the purview of the commission in terms of current police issues, right? Where we're focusing. So that's not something that this commission has been tasked to do, or bring to the commission, or agendize, or have an item, on. What's appropriate for this commission is in terms of what's the model, what outreach we've done, what recommendations of groups we can outreach to, and everything this group has been doing. And so that's where the focus needs to be on. So I don't want to say take my commission, to answer your question, take my commissioner hat on or off. When you're talking about these other issues, they aren't in the scope of the commission's purview. So you can just have a conversation as you normally would. So that's not a concern. So what I'm just saying is what's within the scope of the commission purview is recommending a model. And when you're doing so, outreach is okay. So, hey, I'm a commissioner, I want to hear from the public, or I went here and did outreach, or we talked, or I made people aware to come to our meetings. That's all perfectly acceptable, part of this commission. So there really isn't, for outreach, there really isn't a basis to take that commission hat off, because the other issues, Commissioner Rodriguez, you brought up, is not within the purview of the commission. So it doesn't become an issue for that.
Can I clarify? Because John, if our purview is to come up with a recommendation for oversight, and part of the information that we're gathering is through a survey,
sure,
then it would seem to be pertinent
I understand where you're going. Yeah, again, that question goes to what commission is needed and why, right? So, public claim that police aren't responding to this issue, or whatever it may be, right? Whatever you may hear in terms of the neighborhood, in terms of complaints, right? That would help. Here's why we need this appropriate board, this commission, to address these issues we hear in public, right? But it's not addressing the issues. This is the appropriate body in the future to address these issues. You know what I'm saying on that? So that, yes, it's related in the sense of hearing those complaints. What would be, we've already kind of have a model and the idea of that, yes. But what the complaints the commission receives isn't something this commission is tasked to address. I hope that clarifies it.
So if I may, John, I want to make sure I'm hearing you right. You're saying that we can use that information to inform our decision on our recommendation, but our specific commission is not tasked to address the actual complaint itself.
Exactly.
That's what you're ultimately saying.
Exactly. So let's say
Okay.
you heard an incident in the community, right? We don't agendize that incident to talk about it and what's going to be done about that particular incident. That's not within the purview. But we can look at here what the community feels about that incident. And if we feel it wasn't handled properly, how it could be in the future and what maybe oversight board could handle that or prevent it from happening or remedy it in a better way. That's what this commission, like what's the best means to address issues in the community and through what model, through what board, and how do we get there, but not to address specific issues. So it's not going to be agendizing this internal affairs case or this investigation in the community. That's not what we're doing. We're looking at what we've been doing all along. What's the appropriate model and why, and what we've heard from the community, why this model makes sense or why that model makes sense based on our own reading, our own studying, our own outreach. And if you do develop survey questions, that may help for that. In terms of hearing, questions and answers, public engagement. All those things will help in terms of even further refining what you've already done tonight in terms of what you're looking at. Because that's the process now. And I'm not trying to speak for Cami, obviously she's the expert in this area, but refining it even further and being even more detailed so you have a report. So, and these are all tools, these are all input and information you need. So please, I'm not discouraging putting blinders on her earmuffs and not hearing that. No, you need this stuff. I'm just saying we can't take action if someone says, this happened to me and I want to address that and let's address this issue. We don't have the purview, the authority, the jurisdiction for that. That's all I'm saying. And Chair, you said it exactly correctly too, in a much more concise manner than me. So sometimes I over-explain to my toucher. So, thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that explanation. I was concerned about the compartmentalization. I didn't think I could do that, but I get what you're saying. Whatever complaints we get, we can't actually respond to those. So my question then just is, how do we go about, and because I anticipate this might be staff support, how do we go about finding the types of things that Simone referenced, and I think that others of us have also referenced, of places where the community has already given us feedback, because I do feel like that's something I feel like is within our purview, is to gather things that have already happened. So how do we go about that piece?
And if I can, before we get into that, and I think Chief Melekian referenced it, is, and maybe Chief Melekian can clarify his statement, but I'll go first, is if it's at the sheriff's level, it would be probably different information than if it's at the city, if it's about the City of Santa Barbara Police Department, because they're two different jurisdictions. So in terms of information that we would seek out based on surveys or feedback or forums, I would suggest that we use information related to the Santa Barbara Police Department.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. But I guess I was also thinking that are there community resources that maybe are not things that have been officially submitted to a department at all, right?
Yeah, good point.
But to us as a commission, the Brown Act Commission that was formed, certainly we've all read different things, heard things, but as a commission, we haven't, other than what we've received at public comment, I guess, formally received that public information. I mean.
Yeah, I think what Commissioner Johnson is asking about is going back to the climate survey as opposed to feedback. And I thought we moved away from climate. We can ask about it, but our survey is not a climate survey. It's a feedback form.
Yes, sorry. Yes, thank you for clarifying. I'm not talking about our feedback survey related to our model. I'm talking about past things that have happened before we were even created that are related to climate, right? Because that is within our purview to look at what has already been done, what has already been said, what's already been communicated leading up to the moment where we were created. So yes, so I'm looking at past climate survey type activities that I think would be useful for us to know, but that is definitely separate from our survey design that is now going to be about is feedback related to our specific model. So yes, thank you, Lizzie, that you're right. Those should be kept separate.
And just to add on to that point, I think Lizzie, I think you're the one that said it earlier. I think it is really important as you get that information, first to have it, second to qualify it. Who received that survey, to make sure that you're getting a very wide variety of information from the community. Just so you know, because then that also lets you know who are the stakeholders or segments of the community that we don't have information on. And then that's a whole nother discussion about how you proceed from that point. But I do think that that's an important point of the process.
I do know that Chief Malekian put a comment in the chat. Chief Malekian, if you want to describe your comment for the commission.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Escobedo, and for the opportunity to talk for just a second. I think the speaker in public comment, raised a good point in the sense that the community, I think when the community spoke previously, what they said was that they wanted oversight. That's what they wanted to have. I think a couple of commissioners have accurately touched on the fact that now you're talking about what does oversight look like, and what is the most effective way to get to. The only point I was trying to make in my comment was to make sure that, and I broadened it a little bit because we're in a region, but there is national concern about policing, and those concerns have to certainly be acknowledged and looked at and taken into account. And that's what I meant about the strategic piece. But ultimately, then, hopefully, what we're going to focus on is what are the issues and concerns with our police department? How is it that we want this police department to be better than it is because that oversight is there? And I think clarifying as part of the survey about whether their experiences with law enforcement or with the Santa Barbara Police Department in particular, or with other agencies in other places at other times. And I don't think that that's an insignificant distinction.
Thank you.
So I do have a question. I know there was a survey at the beginning of this year, I believe, and I think Simone in public comment had also mentioned that there was a survey that the police department was doing on the chief recruitment process. I was wondering if you could give us an update on where that is and if we are going to be able to have access to any of those responses, because it seems like they may be relevant to what our research is looking into.
So actually, there was a little bit of I think there was a little bit of a misunderstanding. The police department did not do a survey. The headhunter company that was putting together the job description for the new police chief did that community survey to help write the job description for the police chief. It was not, that survey was not done by the police department, and it wasn't administered by it. I think I can probably reach out to the headhunter and see, see what parts of that are available. I don't think that's, a problem. I can certainly find out and report back to you on it. But the survey itself was used to write the job flyer for the new police chief. That process, as you may or may not know, was suspended with the announcement by the city manager that he was going to step down on September 10th. And there is a pretty strong feeling, and I would support it, even though Mrs. Malakian may not be supporting it quite as much, that really the new city manager needs, with the help of the community and with this group, really needs to be able to pick the police chief that he or she wants to work with. So to that end, I agreed to work into next year. Hopefully the council will take steps to select the next city manager, and that process will then restart. It isn't closed, it hasn't been thrown out, it's just been put on hold.
Thank you for that question, Serafina, and for your answer, Chief. I think that's actually a really great example for us to keep in mind as we're designing our survey, right? To be really clearly communicative about who is behind a survey and what its purpose is and what how the results are going to be disseminated. Because I filled out that survey for the police chief, and I maybe it was there, but it did not occur to me that that was by a third party, and that that the SBPD would never see my responses. So that's just an interesting example, and we'll keep that in mind.
And I will, if the commission would like, I can't commit for them, but I will reach out to the company that's doing the police chief search, and if there is data that they have available to share, I'll make sure that the chair gets that for distribution.
Can I ask, and this, I know we're getting a little outside of our agenda item, but since you raised this, Chief Malakian, I know years ago when I was involved with the police chief search, there was a community forum, or do you know if this consultant is doing any of that community engagement prior to?
Yeah, Commissioner O'Gorman, the community, they never got that far in the process. I know that there was discussion about community engagement and outreach. Well, but at what point in the process, they had just gotten to the point where they had collected the initial group of resumes. And I think there were going to be interviews by the headhunter to sort of reduce the number to a manageable number. And then the city manager's office was going to have a discussion about there would undoubtedly be community outreach and community forums, but what that looked like, I don't think anybody had gotten to that point yet.
Okay, thanks.
I do want to gently caution
yeah
to stay on topic and that's one of the things the Fire and Police Commission do. They consult, and they're in charge of both chief appointments in terms of making recommendations. But again, back to my earlier statement, two points I do want to make for the commission. One, again, back to my earlier statement, again, do outreach. The purpose of the model is, hey, what kind of model would be good to address the issues you hear from the public when in the future? So when someone makes a complaint, how would that be best addressed in the future? What committee can handle what you hear? The second thing, I know we wanted to, I don't know if we did that, I don't believe so, in terms of the panels. I know it's in the chat. So for the purposes of the public, maybe announcing the different, the groups that we have, the events group, the survey group, so we can finalize that on this. So I do see it in the chat. I don't know who wants to read it and kind of go over it, but just wanted to point that issue out.
I can read it, and then we can finish out assigning people to the work groups and then continue our discussion. So we have the writing, messaging, talking points group, I think also known as the communications group. with Jordan and Louisa, and is that it? And then we have the events
And
group with
Christian.
the,
And
what was
Christian.
that?
Christian just raised his hand to be on that group.
Okay, and Christian. And then we have the events group with, which is Rich, Mary, and Jacob. The survey group, which is Rachel, Kim, and Lizzie. And then the internal external education group, which is Anna. And I could be in that one as well.
And maybe, because maybe Cammie, you can, the internal education, was that before committees? We talked about sending things to you that we wanted to talk about as we do our education. I mean, isn't that more of all of us?
This is a different aspect of that. This is about the internal and external education that has to happen so that there's a clear understanding of what's the information contained in the survey, the recommendations that are going to be made. So it's about how that, it's the messaging, and that's not really the right word. It's about how we get out the same information that you all are getting as you're making your decisions out to the public so that they have a good understanding of it as well.
So not the writing group, maybe so distinct from that?
Yes, I think there will be a lot of overlap because they will have to be kind of creating the same thing. I think, for lack of a better term, the internal external education group is really coming up with a curriculum that then is put into writing, put into a visual format by
Yes. I mean, so I feel like that I should be on that too, even though I know there's overlap. I can be on both.
And I have an interest in that, but I'm not quite sure the distinctions. So maybe when we meet next time.
Okay.
I'm kind of starting to fade a little bit, but.
Okay.
How many people are we allowed to have on each group, just for Brown Act stuff?
Let's do 5. It's 6, but if you go one beyond that, that's a Brown Act violation. So 5 would be the max.
I mean, if Mary and Louisa wanted to be on both Gabe and Anna, that's still just 4. So, I mean, it could be that group, maybe what it is just Anna joins the first group and y'all can maybe talk about how to divide those duties, like what actually is communications versus the education piece.
Right.
That's a good point.
Yeah, that's probably, they are so intertwined.
Right, like maybe keep it as one working group now, and then y'all can let us know next time if it should be divided up further.
So that would become Louisa, Jordan, Christian, Anna, and Gabe.
Right, so doesn't that keep us still at the okay number?
Yeah. Good idea. And Cammie, where did you want us to get to for tonight in terms of discussion around public outreach? Do we want to start talking about timeline? Because I think we should take a break pretty soon.
No, I think we're in a good spot because I think people have a fairly good understanding of these working groups. If you are not currently on a working group and it's because you're just not sure yet where you want to be, then I think that that's something that we can, kind of give a time frame of committing to one. But otherwise, I think we're in a good spot. I think the next step is going to come after those groups come back after having met.
Yeah, feels kind of like we've covered it.
Okay, so do we want to just take a vote on, I think just to be safe, take a vote on the working groups that we came up with, and then we will have a recess and then come back and discuss in-person meetings?
Quick understanding. So is the understanding that between these larger meetings, this smaller group will meet and
correct
do the same thing as the other groups had done?
Yes.
Correct.
So, which is great. Now, are those other groups also meeting in between the larger meetings?
Oh, I think you're talking about the original working groups?
Correct.
Oh,
I think those are on pause for now. I think this is going to be
Okay.
our, if I understood correctly.
Sweet. Okay.
Yeah, I would recommend in accordance with the timeline, and like if we can get, these things ready by mid-September, and then I think in a meeting we could probably reevaluate once people are feeling comfortable with the education, reevaluate what's the next step for the next iteration of working groups. Because I know all of us will be needed to do the community outreach, and probably sign up for different times when we're going to go to, whether it's in person or whether it's online. I think we actually scheduled one meeting like this to be a big, presentation to the community at large, so that we can use that recording. I think there's there'll be different iterations, if that helps Kim explain
Yes.
things.
Yeah, just trying to get clarity on time expectations, etc. So thank you.
So do we want to make a motion and then we can close out this item and then take a break?
I'll move to vote on these working groups. Is that we've just discussed?
Yeah, and they are the community events,
The community events,
communications, and survey.
communications, and survey.
Yes, Chair.
Just for also for clarification, don't want the internal external ed group.
We folded that one into communication.
Got it.
Perfect. So that would be the motion. That would be the actionable item. And I apologize earlier. I know there's a question for me on the motion. My internet cut out. But yeah, whenever there's an action to take, that's when you make a motion. So for this one, it would be just the groups under this item. So.
Okay. Was there a second, Chair?
I'll second that.
the motion.
Alonzo with the second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Against? Motion passes.
All right. So we will close out that item and then let's take does 15 minutes sound good?
So I'm just curious, so we have really just one, well, unless I guess there's more conversation around future business, but I'm just wondering if we need a 15-minute break, if the only thing we're going to talk about next is discussion of in-person meetings. So I'm curious if you all feel like we need a break, or would you like to just power through?
I'd kind of want to power through because I don't.
I vote power through.
I vote power through.
Sounds good. So we'll go
All
on
my
to
Olympians are just powering through. So I like
Grab a Red Bull.
So we will then go into our next topic, which is discussion about in-person commission meetings. And it's just talking about in-person meetings when available. So obviously not within our next couple of meetings, it doesn't sound like, but what do we want to take into consideration? And is that something that we're interested when it's an opportunity? So I think the last that we heard was City Council was going to go back into the council chambers in July, and then with the rise of the Delta variant, decided not to, and are still not currently in council chambers. And Sam or John, do you have an update on whether they're close to getting back into council chambers or what the timeline looks like?
Chair Escobedo, Commission, I don't know, Sam, if you know more accurate information than I do. I don't believe we're close because of the Delta variant. The new order that came down Friday for the county at 5 p.m. requiring masks indoors, regardless of vaccination status, obviously has tempered any movement in that area. In some meetings I've had with county health, it looks like they expect this spike to be 2 to 3 months. So with requiring masks indoors meetings, obviously hurts public visual to sit. It hurts these meetings. So it's assuming right now it's more practical to have them online. So that's right now the council's at. I don't have any other updates, but at least in the foreseeable future. When I say that, in the next month or two, I envision we're still going to be doing it as go-to meeting.
And John, we have the mayor that just popped
thank
out.
you,
So she
Mayor.
might be around for a
Who would even
second.
know this better? This is much better than I would. Thank you, Mayor.
With the cases of infection increasing, we're not meeting in person right now. And so after Tuesday's meeting, we have a break until after Labor Day. So there's a 3-week period where we won't have council meetings. So I think we're going to assess then. And fingers crossed, it would be wonderful to be in person.
Yeah, and if I can just say, because I had asked this to be on the agenda, and I understand obviously the Delta variant and all of that. As soon as we are able, I think it would be helpful, because this commission, we're not going to go on, you know, indefinitely. I think to at least have one opportunity to meet as a group somewhere. And see one another, because sometimes I can't even tell, you know, like with staff if they're on, or just, and I think it's also helpful, you know, for the community. So I would just.
I will say though, I would rather see your faces on video than be in a space where we all have masks on and we can even see less of each other's faces and expressions. So yeah, hopefully it'll be possible soon, but this at least allows us to see our full faces.
Absolutely. I would like to also just say maybe a hybrid. We don't know other people's situations / what they feel comfortable with, or if they have certain autoimmune disorders, etc. So I just want to raise that, if anything, a hybrid, if folks want to meet in person, but some folks may feel more comfortable meeting virtually. Just my 2 cents.
Definitely.
Well, and I'm wondering as well. Sorry, Commissioner Rodriguez, go ahead.
Oh, thanks. I miss meeting in person. I miss there's just a level of connection that's lost in the interwebs. And I also feel like it's as commissioners, it's our responsibility to be good stewards. And while I want to meet in person, I think we need to model safety and thinking about community over self. Yeah, I think I would prefer to stay online until public health says it's safe for us to be indoors, maskless. Yeah.
Well, and I'm wondering as well if we advance to a point where we don't have to do masks indoors, or we can safely do a hybrid situation like Commissioner Killebrew mentioned. I'm wondering if it's like within our purview to make it a policy of this board and the business that we conduct, where we conduct it, to require proof of vaccination to maximize safety for participants, either for us, city staff, or any members of the community that want to appear. Probably hairy question, but I'm just asking it to see if we can do it ourselves.
I think, like, isn't the city, I mean, I assume they're probably going to have to make that decision for themselves, since so many state agencies and other orgs have done that. And I would assume we would follow the lead of what the council decides. If the city of Santa Barbara is requiring proof of vaccination or testing, then we would be able to just fall in line with that. I don't know. I'm hesitant to even talk about that until we have something to go with, just because, you know, why open ourselves up to that debate at this point?
Yeah, I think the council has to set that rule first.
We just went through it at the college, you know. It's I'm glad the conversation's over, but I'd rather let someone else take the lead.
Well, and we would miss Cami. Cami would still be
virtual.
I want Cami to come out here at least one time and do an in-person thing, you know.
Once we can do in person, that would definitely be in the works. I wouldn't let you meet without me.
Yeah. Yeah, so that we can look to that.
But there's definitely some time time before we have to plan that. So
I understand.
And are there other considerations that you would want us to think about as we approach possibly that date at some time in the future, whether it's 1 or 2 or 3 months in the future? I think having the hybrid option, that's definitely one great component. Are there other things like that that you would like us to have prepared before we return with an item like this closer to the date?
Who are you asking?
Anyway, just
I would love, I mean, I would just love to see some, like, kind of an outline of some accessibility things, like, you know, like we've said, I think hybrid option, you know, this is what everyone's talking about, is going back to normal. If normal wasn't good before, we don't need to go back to it. So yeah, I mean, I think other than just saying hybrid options, I think it'd be interesting to actually think through what does that actually look like for certain people, and what people might want. So maybe that's something we can all do, right? Is like think about accessibility issues and help Gabe and Anna come up with that maybe when it becomes an agenda item again.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to think about transportation and how easy it is to get to the meetings.
He said he wants us to think about transportation and how easy it is to get to the meetings.
Point.
Well, I think that would be the piece of the hybrid, right? So if having accessibility and making sure that wherever we go, when it is time, that it is accessible for everyone to get there as well, and if not, then being accessible online in that hybrid mode. I'm for that.
And I would say just a big enough room that, especially with our size, and then if there's public, you know, to spread out a bit. I looked today at maybe one of the parks, whether it's Carrillo Rec Center or the little room off to the side that's, you know, bigger than some of the council rooms. Just thinking about that possibility.
And maybe just some facilitation strategies as well, because when you are in a hybrid environment, it's even harder to not, you know, to have everyone feel like they have a voice and not, you know, forget that there are some people on a screen rather than in the room.
Right.
Yeah, and we need to be in a place where there's a microphone.
I missed that last part.
I heard, yeah, say that one more time, Jacob.
We need to be in a place where there's a microphone.
Yeah, we need to be at a place where there's a microphone.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's always hard, or like, yeah, to amplify what's happening in the room and then vice versa on that.
And there can be devices that we use in education all the time that there are people in the room, but people online can hear it too. So those are to connect to that one.
Kind of those
tech concerns.
Yeah.
I agree. I like this conversation. I'm wondering, is this something, again, that we have to follow city council's guidance from, and then also have city staff probably spend some time on to set up for us? Just because I worry about the time that we're spending on finding a place or in-person meeting versus actually focusing on our purview. But I completely get meeting in person. I agree with it. It's great if everybody feels comfortable, but I think if that's something that city staff, we should also follow what the city council is doing. And also to Commissioner Rodriguez's point of like leading by example, we should.
I'm just taking notes for so that if we get to a point a couple of months from now, Vice Chair Cepeda and I, we could do some legwork with staff to get these sort of issues addressed and bring it to the commission if we want to approach the commission again to meet in person.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And just a reminder, because when we talked about this 3 months ago and we did brainstorm, we talked about the Board of Supervisors large conference room, and I had spoken with Ethan Bertrand, and he said once we're ready to do that, a Board of Supervisor member can reserve that room. So
Another option I saw a couple weeks ago is to have a meeting in one location and then set up satellite offices where people can go and participate.
So you said another option is a particular building that I didn't understand, Jacob, where people can participate.
Another option is we could have a meeting in one location and then get different community groups to host the stream in their location as well, so we could have people spread out throughout the city.
I love the idea of a CFC watch party at various locations. That would we would go viral. I would love that. I mean, we have one public commenter each meeting. So, but it is a good idea when we're looking at space, and it's kind of like what the city council did with this interview, with the appointment process. They had folks available online, and then they had if technology was an issue, they offered a site where people can walk in and offer public comment. So yeah, I think I'm gonna be, thinking about the CFC watch party for a long time now. Maybe create some bingo cards to go with.
It may happen after we're disbanded. I don't know. But
Even towards city council did that 2 weeks ago. They had a meeting in council chambers, and then they had about 5 locations throughout the city where people could go and give comment.
the
Yeah,
city
that's a good
people.
point. They've already done, the city a couple weeks ago did something with kind of multiple
The
locations. So
city
they've got a
rental.
We've got a couple months to think about all that stuff. So
Yeah, if I may add, staff will work with the chair and vice chair. From the onset, I want to let the commission know there's really 2 rooms we could broadcast live, right? We're fortunate through broadcasting through GoToMeeting. It's through this medium, but if it would be live, it'd be the council chambers, the Gephardt room on 630 Garden Street. So any other meeting place, we sacrifice that. Also, to do off city facilities was a little bit complicated because, there would have to be license agreements and everything else. So to see where it is, and then again, you wouldn't be able to probably broadcast it live on TV and having city staff being part of that and helping that. So I think it's a good idea in terms of we'll be watching. We'll follow councils. We want everyone to be safe and have meetings where everyone can. I think it's a great point. Seeing each other's facial expressions is so important, and these type of meetings. And we'll work with staff. We'll work with the vice chair. I'm staff, but we'll work with the chair and vice chair. And when we see more progress on this, we'll come into it. But I just want to make the one point in terms of having this broadcast, which is important for the community. There's really 2 sites we can have available, but we'll make hopefully progress soon on this issue.
All right. So I think that closes that item. And so the last item is future business, in which I apologize, I didn't draft up a mock meeting minutes for Sam to pull up, but what I was kind of thinking is a continuation of the public outreach discussion with work group updates. And on the timeline, it also says selecting a survey and one suggestion that I thought was really good, and Sean was able to connect us with someone, is using UCSB since they have researchers there. So we're gonna hope to bring to the commission in the second meeting in August someone who can interview with the commission, and if that's someone we want to choose to work with for the survey, then we can move forward.
So I think my personal perspective, with as long as we're talking, the meeting's going, that we have enough on our plate with coming back with our committee reports and talking about that, all of that. And trying to stick to our timeline.
Yeah, I'm also wondering, I just want clarification, if we're going to have that at the next meeting, what is the expectation of the survey working group between now and then?
Not to have it done. It's just to have someone interview with us, and we can either decide to contract with them, similar to when we had NACOL, and hopefully we'll have a couple of options for everyone. So at that point, they can answer any questions that the commission has based on past work that they've done or any other.
So the working group could prepare questions for these folks for.
Yeah, that would work. That would definitely work.
Okay.
And I'll connect with you, the vice chair and I will connect with you before that meeting.
So, Gabe, would you take the lead on getting survey companies together, and then you'll let us know, and then we'll all decide who to go with? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we've contacted one researcher from UCSB, and then in an ideal situation, we would have a second option at least for the commission to be able to choose from. UCSB is a really good resource that's close by, and I'm not, I can work with Sam to find another survey firm that they typically contract with the city.
So my question would be, is this researcher from a particular department? Are they specifically, is there skill set in surveys specifically? Having got my PhD at UCSB, I just want to make sure that we know what we're talking about here.
Yeah, and Sean, I don't know if you want to come on and because you connected me with this particular individual.
And maybe that's not necessarily right now. I just mean at some point.
No, definitely, and that would be what bringing them to the commission would kind of be, is more of like an interview where we get to ask some of those questions.
Right. Okay, get it. I was confused as it was just a researcher from UCSB. It just seemed kind of random, so I just wanted to see where that came from.
Yeah, their area of expertise is related to our particular topic.
So would it be, and again, not to get into this too much, but so for instance, the survey group kind of working on something, even a rough draft or something, and then at that meeting, getting feedback from the UCSB folks, or would it just start from scratch with them?
I think
it's probably I think it's probably too much to think that we could have a draft of the survey. Yeah. But I definitely think, like, we can convene the survey group to just talk about what kinds of information we might want from this survey,
outline,
right? Like, just a general concept of what it is to actually present something and then ask for feedback about this thing. So, I don't know if, I can imagine us coming up with questions to ask sort of professional evaluators to see if we're on the right track. I guess I would try, if Lieutenant Hill or whomever has, recommendations, I think it'd be interesting to talk to a couple different options, but I don't think we'll have a draft for them. Because they'll probably help with the draft. That's also kind of the point of finding a professional too.
Yeah. Right.
And Cammie, is that kind of what you thought as well? Bringing a couple of people and discussing it with the group?
Yes, and having them do potentially brief, very brief presentations. I think even, because I think you don't want to take up too much time with that piece. Any information that the group can get about them ahead of time would probably be helpful. Because I also think there's going to be we need a lot of conversation for the report out from the working groups. And so, not that the other isn't important, but just trying to figure out time-wise how we fit that all into one meeting and keep moving forward.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. All right, any other comments, questions, concerns?
Did we establish who the lead for each of the subgroups are?
No, we did not. Thank you, Kim.
Let's reopen that item for just a brief moment to establish leads for each working group.
I volunteered to be the lead on the, whatever we're calling it, event or calendar group.
I did already draft an email to Lizzie and Kim. So that's all I can send that and take the lead.
I was about to nominate you, Rachel. you were so organized. And, yeah.
Happy to do that.
I mean, I don't mind doing it, although I wouldn't mind nominating Jordan to do it. But I don't mind taking the lead.
I'm happy either way. I can do it for you, Lisa.
I'll nominate Jordan.
Thank you for the nomination.
You're very welcome.
All right, that was easy. We'll close that item again.
All right.
Chair, if I could just get that in a formal motion. I think Commissioner Louisa Wood nominated Killebrew for lead on the marketing group, O'Gorman on the events group, and Rachel Johnson on the survey group. Was there a second?
Oh, I'd second that. Yeah.
Okay, the motion, and it's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes. Thank you.
All right. So with that, that's our last item for today, and we can adjourn the meeting at 8 o'clock on the dot. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Good
you,
job.
everyone.
Everybody stay healthy.
Nice to
you
see
all.
you. Everyone take care.
Thank you.
Safe
Good job,
travels,
everyone.
everybody.
Stay healthy.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye.